So it's 7:08, September 9th, 2024. I'll call the meeting to order, the school building committee. As we always do, just do a roll call attendance. So start with Mr. Loring.
Here.
Carrie Hurley.
Here.
John Cohane.
Here.
Online, we have Glenn Hoffman. Need you on mute, Glenn. And Tim Lombard.
I'm here.
And then I just reported Aqua, so Aqua is joining now too. Just give it a second. While Aqua is joining, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, which is citizen speak. We reserve the first 15 minutes of the meeting for any citizen that would like to speak. We ask that you hold your commentary to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address. So if you're online, please raise your hand, or in person, please step up, and you'll be recognized. I think Aqua will be rejoining, looks like, so keep an eye out for him. Okay, seeing no citizens. Agenda item number 3 is approval of past minutes from Monday, August 26th, 2024. Everybody got a copy of these in your packets. So just open it up to see if there's any comments, edits, questions, and if not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
Second by Carrie. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote because we're hybrid. So Mark?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Glenn?
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right. Moving on. Agenda item number 4, old business item A, schematic design update. So here with us tonight in person, thank you for joining, is Shanali and Larry Spang from Arrow Street, and Andrew is online with us too. So just to kind of give us an update on where we're at right now with the schematic design. So turn it over.
Sure, thanks.
I can share my screen if that works.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Thanks, Andrew. So as Andrew's pulling that up, we are on course to deliver a schematic design set October 18th.
Raise the voice.
Oh,
Sorry, just to make sure.
So we're on course to deliver the schematic design set October 18th, and we're currently working with the working group to go through some of the interior layouts of the classrooms of the teams. We met with them last Thursday, and we are aiming to meet with them next week again and include the landscape architect in that meeting to talk about some of the site conditions. As many of you know, the site has a lot of variation in its grade, and we're going to talk through some of the options on how to navigate that and how to walk around the building. So that's coming up in the next 2 weeks. Tonight we have the presentation with some updates from last Thursday's meeting. So we got some feedback during that meeting, and we implemented as many as we could for tonight's presentation. So the plans that you're going to see tonight are a slight variation on the ones that we talked about on Thursday. So we're going to primarily focus on the academic levels 3 and 4, and then touch on 1 and 2. At the next meeting, we'll give a further update on those more public spaces, but really the gist of it is to understand how the teaming and the adjacencies of the classrooms and those interspersed academic areas work. And then Andrew's going to walk us through how we got to where we are and some of the 3rd and 4th teaming options.
Great. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, loud and clear.
Great. Okay, good evening. And thanks, Shanali. So what I'm going to do is start us off with where we last when we last spoke about the organization of the building, just as a kind of reminder of where we were. And then I'll walk us through what we've developed since then. So what you're seeing here is what we call an exploded axon, where we've kind of spread out the building. And this is something we looked at with this group on July 1st. And at that time, this was still looking at an 8-team organization. And one of the major things that we have looked at since then was to progress a design that uses 7 teams, because it makes for a more efficient building. And so we're going to kind of start on the top of the building and work our way down, where we're looking at the team organization and how that we think can play out with 7 teams instead of 8. And before we get into the plans, I did want to take a minute to just walk you through some of the sort of design thinking that we're doing during schematic design, because up until this point, it's been a lot of discussion about what are the spaces, what are the adjacencies, which is all very important. But also, during schematic design, we start to think a little bit about what we call the massing, what is the shape and look of the overall building. And I just wanted to take a minute to kind of walk you through sort of our progress. So I'm going to show you 4 diagrams that kind of walk you through how we are responding to the site and how the building is responding to the site, and how we sort of have arrived at the shape of the building and the organization of the building as a result of understanding the needs and demands of the site. And so the first one is, sorry, I think this is there's a lag, so this might change on me. But as we all know, the first step has been about relocating Guile Road. And so the heavy sort of solid line here is the existing approximate location of Guile Road, and the dashed blue line is where it's getting relocated to. And the main benefit of doing that is that we're capturing territory in order to build the school. And in doing that, we create this zone where the majority of the arrival and drop-off activities happen and the parking happens. The red line here represents the sort of main mass of the building and how it's sort of responding to that. And that it's sort of like the inversion of Guile Road. And the benefit of that is that the building will have a very sort of nice way of presenting itself when you're arriving to it. It will sort of has this cradling shape that allows you to sort of approach it in a way that feels very comfortable. And that sort of that's been present in the diagrams that we've shown you throughout. And then when we started to get a little bit more detailed about the layout, we also thought about how you enter the building from the 2 sort of primary sides off of Guile Road. And we so we sort of have these 3 kind of forces, if you will. One is sort of this arcing shape that's opposite of Guile Road that defines the big move. And then on the ground level, we have these sort of 2 paths that are kind of coming in and through the building. And so, that way of looking at it starts to sort of set up some basic organizing shapes that we're starting to look at, in 3 dimensions. And so when you look, I'm going to zoom in on this one a little bit, but when you start to think about those shapes as a building form, we can sort of see how those ideas about these lines that I just went through are starting to take shape as a building. And so if we look at that as a 3-dimensional view, just zoom out here. If this arcing line here on the bottom of this image is Guile Road, then you see how the kind of overall mass of the building is opposite that. And then at the ground level, there are these opportunities for the paths to kind of move into and through the building, and relating to the pre-K space beyond. So that's just some of the thinking that's going on, while we're fine-tuning adjacencies and layouts. Because at the end of the day, it's going to work and everything's going to be well located, but we also want the building form and shape to be something that is architecturally sound as well. So, okay, so I'm going to start here on the 4th floor. Whoops. Apologies. And I think the main thing here to point out is that we've got 3 teams on this level. And with each team, we are centering it around a shared learning commons. So at the sort of 2 ends, you're seeing the hallways getting wider to kind of create this space. And at the team that's located in the middle of the plan, which is sort of at the bend in the bar, we're imagining that learning commons can be located along the southern edge, which would get the benefit of a lot of great natural light and would sort of be related to the space where the stair will be located. And so these clusters that you're seeing here are the 4 primary classrooms, and one of which is the science room, and that's happening at the 2 ends and at the center as well. We have you'll see as we go down through the floor plans that we have located the special education programs interspersed throughout. One of the pieces of feedback that we got last week was that there were a couple of places where it was perhaps too concentrated. So we'll look for feedback on that tonight if the new arrangement feels better. But one thing I want to point out is that there's a very straightforward structure to the building. So if I'm going to try to draw a couple lines here, hopefully that shows up. But from that location this way, and from this location to the left on the plan, you have a very straightforward orthogonal structural grid and sort of repeating bays. We've made sure to stack the floors on top of each other going down and align hallways and things like that. And what that means is that, yes, there is this sort of bend where the building is sort of responding to the site. But we think that this is something that can be achieved because it's limited to a very specific area, and it's also happening in a place where it's not very difficult to do that, which is to say where we've got most of the vertical circulation in the center of the school. So I'm going to go down to the 3rd level now, and you'll see that it's very much similar. So again, we've got 3 teams, a little bit of a different mix in the special education, but again, working to sort of locate those in between teams. And so they're sort of equidistant from the different groups. And I'll now move down to the 2nd floor. Actually, before I move down, are there any questions about these 2 floors? Because they're very, very similar in how they're set up.
So I've got one question too, Andrew. Just let me know you can hear okay too.
I can hear you.
Okay. I know, and I know with 3 science classrooms, it's kind of like a loaded question, but I know before we had 4 teams per floor, the science rooms were sharing prep space.
Yes.
So, like now, even if we were to get 2 rooms next to each other sharing, we would just basically delete 1 prep space. So I think, for you guys, was it just more convenience for location and just add an additional prep space on there for it?
Right. So that's a good point. So yes, when there were 4 teams per floor, you could sort of set two teams back to back, mirrored around the science rooms, and have 1 prep room shared by the 2 science rooms. That is not so easy to do now for a couple of reasons. One is because we have 7 instead of 8 teams, but also because we realize that it's really much more preferred by the MSB, or sorry, in general by not MSBA, but by DESE, which will have some commentary about this, I believe, that it's better for the special education programs to be, all intermixed evenly throughout. And what was starting to happen where we had the shared science rooms was that we were getting sort of higher concentrations of special education in one area. So, that's to say that instead of right now, there's one prep room per science room. So though in these plans there are 7 prep rooms. Something we could talk about is whether the prep room that is adjacent to a hallway could serve multiple science rooms, and maybe it's not adjacent to the science room and it's just sort of more equidistant. There's some options there.
Yeah, and for me, I was just bringing it up more just for others that may not have thought it before. But I think the addition of it's totally fine if it's there to intermingle the special ed with the remaining floor.
Right, and I think it makes for a more sort of logical layout in accepting that.
And I think what's different in sort of the more traditional way you think about this, all the science classrooms would be in sort of one area of the building, and often we put it on the top because of the exhaust needs and things like that. And here the science is built into the classroom nodes in a way that I think helps the education, but it makes the infrastructure a little more difficult. It might be good, Andrew, if you can zoom in on one of the sort of theme segments just to see it. And, this is sort of the module as we've been talking to the educators about, 3 classrooms and a science room, and the science room is sort of like a 4th classroom with a little bit more activities. And then the SG small group work rooms, a planning room in red there for the teachers, and the science prep room around this learning commons, which at the moment is sort of the big bulge in the middle of the python there. But that's essentially trying to create a neighborhood where the kids and the teachers are all working together. And so that's, to me, the interesting part about how science is now integrated into the classrooms as opposed to down the hall, up the stairs to the top of the building, which is where we used to put them.
Yeah, Mark.
I guess one thing I see is the small group room is only accessible through the classroom, is what it appears here. And so that's flag that. I guess that's more maybe a programmatic question for you, Peter, of just, I could see that being disruptive, right? If they need to use that and like the teachers pull the kids from a kind of couple spaces and walking into there. Again, the only way to get there is kind of through the class, what the other teacher in that room is doing. I don't know if those could just
stack it this way.
Yeah, I don't know if they can just be turned or based on square footage layout like that, prefer having it that way versus kind of more shotgun.
To have a corridor access.
Yeah, to have corridor access within the spaces.
Probably makes sense just to provide more flexibility.
Yeah.
I guess part of it, and it varies a lot, and certain districts like it certain ways and others the other way, but so the way they're shown is from the classroom, so you would be basically serving those 2 classrooms. Because you're right, it'd be hard to say, oh, kids, we're going to march past this other class to get in there. And I think if we see them as more of a shared resource, then you're right, let's put them out on the corridor. And then the question is always, well, do you try and have a door from each classroom that sort of reduces the kids out in the hallway and back in? Or you say, okay, then we'll just have the one door, so it's either 2 doors and you come in that way, or you have 1 door and you come in that way, or you try and have 3 doors, which eats up a lot of floor space.
Yeah.
But those are little bits in detail that I appreciate.
But I guess I think not having to go out in the hallway is nice, but the reality is in a kind of a classroom environment, as if there's one teacher in that classroom, it's not that hard for a student to go outside and into that small group space and then come back. But if it's probably not an intervention space, meaning you would have it like staffed with someone. So
No, I think this was sort of like we were treating it as an extension of the classroom based on the visioning sessions and sort of the way we developed the program. But if it's a staffed space at your bud, then yeah, we would change it around.
Yeah, I don't think it would be a staff space. I'm thinking kind of like long term. It's a trade-off, right?
Yep.
Long term, like 10, 20, 30 years down the road, it might be nice to have the flexibility of hallway access.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because there could be a staff space or.
Right.
Or to
Just as, yeah.
special education teacher's office or like, whatever else as we continue to grow and have to, space. Advise yourself.
Okay, that's good input.
That's great. Thank you. We can come back to these floors if there's any questions that come up for people. I don't know, is the refresh really slow for you all as well? Because for me, it's
Yep.
not just me.
It's painting it slowly.
Drawing it in real time here. Well, I'm going to try to go to the next page anyway.
Businessing about it.
Andrew, you don't happen to have that on your desktop, do you? Or is it on the network?
It's on the desktop, believe it or not. So I don't, now it seems to be catching up quickly.
Oh, suddenly we got speed.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now we're looking at the second floor, and this floor's got one team up on the northern wing, similar setup to what we were just looking at. It's got the media space on the southern sort of lobe here that's above the cafeteria, and there's a zone where we imagine there could be some overlook, a sort of double height space along the edge where there will be a nice sort of view to nature out this side. And then the remainder of the floor is composed of world language classrooms and special education classrooms that are sort of trying to be evenly intermixed. And this, so, I think one of the things to think about is if the 7th grade and the 8th grade each have 3 teams, and one of the years has the need for an extra team, this would be likely the way that it works. I mean, I suppose there's a couple of ways that it could be done. But I think thinking through the utility of having this team on this floor is something worth the group talking through or just, thinking about. And what you're seeing in some of these other areas are sort of canopy or roof areas below that are outside and below where the sort of plan is cut. And you'll start to see here that on the left, that's the second level of the gym. It's not floor space, it's just sort of volume. And also the auditorium. These are 2 of the larger volumes that are sort of present at this level. If there's not questions about this one, I will go down to the first floor and then maybe we can circle back.
I just want to say one thing, Andrew. So those other 4 blue classrooms are the world languages.
Yes.
Interspersed with the special ed, but kept them close to the media so that there's a liveliness of the interactivity between the classrooms and the students going in and out of that media center, so that this floor had the feeling of activity, because we know there's only one team on this floor, but to have that active feeling all the way throughout.
Andrew, can you zoom in a bit so folks can see?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say if we could zoom in just like sort of the cross piece so they can see the world language. A little hard to read.
Let me know if I should go closer.
You guys can see that, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so to Shonali's point, that this will be a pretty lively area because students will be coming from all of the teams down to this floor for world language classes and for media class time in the media center. One thing to point out, something we've talked about in the past was about co-locating the guidance programs with media, which is what you're seeing here in the sort of orange boxes here embedded in the media space.
Yeah, go for it.
Is there any particular reason to put the guidance in the IT spaces kind of at the bottom of the media space versus kind of closer to the main corridor?
Yes, well, no, I mean, I think it should be closer to the corridor. It sort of ended there in our last conversation because all the pieces have been moving around.
Yeah.
Like this is gonna be one of like 50 iterations that you're gonna see between now and October 18th. But there has been conversation about opening up that back wall, because that's the view, right? Like that's where the windows are gonna be, and it's where we can get that space flooded with light. So there's still a little bit of programmatic chess playing or checkers playing, like trying to like move the spaces around. The key for us was to get those teams and those academic spaces really sort of stacked and organized that reflected all the conversations. And you're going to see not only in the second floor, but the first floor, there's still some massaging that needs to happen. And part of what's driving that is we've shifted our focus away from the stacking of the building as the academic area is settled, and to really understand what the site, sort of the ups and downs of the site elevations are, and how's that impacting the building, accessing the building. And those are the conversations we're going to be having over the next couple of weeks of like, how do we resolve that? I can bring up all of these things that we're talking about, but I don't have any real resolution for you this evening. That's what we're working on at the moment. But that's going to impact second floor as well.
The question I have too is the view that's there on the right side, or the opening. Yeah, that one, Andrew, that you mentioned as a view, like just knowing the site out there. That's just basically the terrain differential between there's really no view.
Well, you're up on the second floor, so if you're on the first floor, I would agree. You'd be looking at sort of the retaining wall.
Yeah.
But here you're on the second floor, so the view is really up above at the field. If you don't want that view, we can talk about it, but that's what we're calling the view. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll talk, I think, in more detail about this point with the landscape discussion, but we are, when we go down to the first floor, hoping to sort of define, an area out here on the lower level outside of the cafeteria, which is, backed up by the rising terrain. But we think that there's a really nice opportunity to make a really satisfying outdoor space for the students to, inhabit in a number of different ways. But that's something I think we're going to be digging into more as we're looking at how much retaining wall is needed to do that, and so forth. So that would be at the next discussion.
Yeah, Mark. Sorry. Yeah, just chime in. Sorry. Appreciate it.
The curve around the world language in the planning room, did that exist on the third floor? And I guess I'm just wondering, given that there's a low roof below it, I don't know if that's just not quite a roof, but more just an overhang. But anyways, obviously, it makes the planning room space itself kind of awkward in terms of kind of that tight angular corner. I just didn't know if there was a reason other than a curved edge is more architecturally pleasing than kind of just like a straight box over, but any reason not to just carry that line kind of straight over in order to better square out those spaces.
Yeah, so I think, one of the reasons I wanted to start to show you the ideas behind how the massing of the building is developing is that there is this sort of push and pull between, the shape of the building and how that helps support circulation patterns from this larger site coming in. And that's definitely happening on the first floor, which you'll see in a second. But, the scale of that entry that we're creating at the time that we've created this plan, we think that there's value in it, sort of that curve being present on 2 levels. And, so that's present. And then we're sort of also working through the locations and sizes of the different rooms. And I agree with you that teacher planning space there is a little bit awkward. And so, we're sort of pushing and pulling with how we're inhabiting these curved walls to kind of find, is there a better layout for that, or does the curve itself need to be modified so that it's, not making an awkward space? And so we're all on the same page that we don't want to land on awkward looking spaces or ones that are hard to use. And I think that, that's, you're very correct that this is an area where, we're kind of need to look at regularizing it. I think it can probably handle a little bit of, of a geometry that's not perfectly square. But if it's, too much, then yeah, it's not where we want to be. So I'm going to go down to the first floor. I think it's refreshing relatively quickly now. Jinxed it.
Item 4, no, just kidding.
It's the suspense,
Mhm.
Well, as this is drawing for us, I will preface this floor a little bit with, in the last week or so, we've been digging in more deeply with the civil engineer about the grading, and especially where the north wing of the building comes alongside the athletic field of the high school. And in understanding exactly what's going on with the existing conditions there, we've decided to move some of the mechanical and sort of spaces that don't need to have windows and so forth into that zone, and starting to think about using the building to sort of act as the retaining wall in that area, rather than having classroom spaces that we then have to just, build a retaining wall not that far off of them in order to create, to get light in there. And so that's why you're seeing the sort of block of the dark gray on the right-hand side of the northern wing up here.
I think this is the biggest change that we made from last Thursday's meeting to today. So I don't think you've seen this at all.
So one question with that, Andrew, I know we've talked about firefighter access potentially having to be fully around the building. I assume we haven't talked to the fire.
So we've talked to Code Red,
Yeah.
and right now they've given us some dimensions, and you can see the little corner of the roadway on the northeast. So we don't have to have the road continue or be continuous behind the building. It just has to extend a certain dimension past so that the hoses can reach. So I think it's 250 feet from one side and 250 feet from the other. So that's why you see a little bit of that extension. Then if we had the rest of the site plan to the south, you would see a little bit of an extension there as well. But it doesn't have to be continuous.
We should confirm with the fire department though too, because we have that
Yeah.
HJ's
Yes.
kind of override code and say, they might have a town ordinance or something that requires it.
So the way that we're anticipating that is we'll take the schematic set once we've done that, and then talk to
Chief man.
the head of the fire department, but we probably also want to talk to somebody in the police department to initiate any security conversations. And those would happen prior to like the kickoff of DD, so we can anticipate any of their comments and start incorporating them at that time.
Yep.
I know there was one more agency we have to check it out for. It's on my schedule. When we get to schedule. I'll remember.
Okay. All right, back to you, Andrew.
Okay. So The major organization of this level, besides what we just talked about, is similar to where we were, which is to say that the dining and cafeteria zone is sort of located here off of the main entry and lobby space. And as I was saying before, our hope is to be able to develop the outdoor space along here as something that can be sort of a spill out space for the cafeteria. And then moving to the left, we're sort of going into the arts wing, so to speak, where we've got the auditorium with the stage and drama. And then we located the ensemble, piano lab, chorus, and practice rooms adjacent to that so that the music rooms could serve as sort of green room spaces when there's a performance in the auditorium where people who are waiting to perform can sort of be getting prepared, and then they can sort of move into the stage without having to, go through the more sort of public areas. And above that is where the gym is. Sorry, I can't see my cursor here, so that's why I'm drawing in strange places. The gym is in the same location, and we've sort of, I'm gonna zoom in here. We've tightened up the plan here a bit with locker rooms adjacent to each other and to the gym so that you can sort of move into the gym, into the locker room, get changed, and then move directly into the gym. And the other thing that we've tried to do here is create a path that goes from one side of the building to the other, which we're imagining for nighttime, off hours, weekend performances in the auditorium and or the gym. That would allow you to sort of close down the building somewhere close to here, and then that wing would be in use, and there would be restrooms for those that are there for those events in that zone. So we thought that was starting to work out pretty well.
Also in that, pulled the ensemble room and others down to the end of near the stage. And Peter, we talked about that on Thursday about making those sort of the green room or the prep area for the backstage activity. So that seems to be working in the right direction. And that corner of the building actually has some really nice light. And rather than give all that to the mechanical spaces, we flopped it to, and it seems to be starting to work out.
So where the back of house spaces, that gray rectangular area is where we're going to be required to have a retaining wall. And retaining walls, it's going to be tall enough that it's going to cast a shadow. So it doesn't make sense to put classrooms there. It just makes sense to put any of those back of house spaces. Plus you have that fire access road turning in a little bit. So if those spaces need to be serviced, it can be serviced from that backside without having to have a whole bunch of utility trucks sitting in the front of your building or blocking the access road that's between the middle school and the preschool.
The building wall going to be retaining wall, or is it going to be a separate retaining wall?
It's a separate retaining wall right now.
Ultimately, it'd be nice if we can get the building to stay.
The building's just going to use that
Yeah.
as a retaining wall.
Right, so,
You're not referring to the first pass at it.
Yeah.
I remember talking about that, but then I'm thinking like,
And we're like, wow, that's
sometimes integrated in there.
right,
a
if
10-foot
we,
tall retaining wall, then get rid of that.
so Andrew and I have been studying a section of where the land can slope up. What we're trying to do is get it so that somebody can walk all the way back there from either the preschool or from the far side of the middle school, all the way up to Gile Road and turn right and head towards the high school, either that parking area or if there's activity and people are parking, and so that there's like this continuity of a path. The challenge right now is the slopes and navigating them so that it's an accessible walkway rather than a ramp with handrails, because that's not the nicest experience. So that's what we're working on right now between civil and landscape. And as Larry said, one of the solutions could be making the building itself a retaining wall, or having a separate, like this is all these things that we're studying this week and next week.
So we got one question online from, Mr. Tom, go for it. You had your hand raised. Apologies if I didn't.
It's actually just a statement. When we did our tours of a couple of the schools, I'm noticing the wood shop way up here in the far corner and the auditorium and stage down on the other end. Those two schools had the wood shop close because obviously they need to build set pieces. And I thought it was just a great idea. Just wanted to throw it out there. I know we're not close to being complete here, but just wanted to throw that idea out there.
Okay.
That W shop, is that a wood shop or a workshop?
It's a workshop. It's the building facilities maintenance
Yeah.
shop.
Tom, that's more for your guys than for students.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
If we were gonna build stuff in this building, we'd probably be in the
Yeah.
STEM flex
STEM
tech
tech.
rooms though, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, part of your idea too is the ensemble room to use that.
Right.
Is that the idea?
Well, if you think of the ensemble room, like where the kids gather before they go on stage, put on their costumes and all that kind of
Okay.
stuff.
Sorry. That's different than what Tom was saying.
Yeah.
What we were thinking was trying to flip the admin and the art room and have this sort of stuff being, hands-on learning. Andrew, if you can zoom in on those top two spaces. Yeah, sort of there might be good.
You want to get the STEM and tech in there as well?
I think we got one of them. So we've got two STEM rooms, and if we can flip the admin space, which is in red, across the entryway to where the art room is shown, flip the art room back, and then you've got sort of STEM tech spaces with the art room all in one big area. And I think that, to me, feels like it'd be an interesting space to encourage hands-on learning.
And then it goes back to what Tom was asking about the wood shop, but if those tech STEM rooms become your workshop, then your art spaces can also be your messy spaces to help support those construction pieces and assembly.
Next round of stuff.
Yep.
The size of the gym, is it? We did make it slightly bigger than.
It is bigger, and you caught me off guard with the dimensions. It is bigger. I don't remember what it is offhand, but it has enough for the 3 bleachers on the one
Yep.
side, plus there's overrun all the way around.
And the storage for the gym, is there separate storage, is that skinny storage outside the auditorium?
It's right now,
Building
skinny
storage.
storage.
Yeah.
We're working on it, yeah. You
Yeah,
can't even
yeah,
fit a
stay
ball in
tuned.
there.
Stay tuned, I think. On that.
That actually is a good question. Can the storage live inside the cardio yoga room,
As a separate room or?
within the room, access within that room? Because that,
That's a separate room access within that room.
yeah.
We should look at all
Yeah,
of that to see. We're still.
There's,
pushing and pulling the-
a couple things that need to be solved.
I think auditorium, just size wise, I'm just curious with having the high school right next door with a huge auditorium. I'm just curious, could you steal space from that for these?
So currently we're holding square footage enough for 350 seats, but we really have to do a layout to see where we land, because obviously we're trying to work with the slope of the land to see, as you navigate down, and accessibility and all of these things, and see how they play out with that particular shape. So I think that's also one of the next steps, is to see where we land. But the aim was to get 350 seats, but we're open to discussion about if that's the right size.
I just was curious, since there's kind of reduced space for this. Might be some sharing opportunities with a school right next door.
Yeah, that was one that came up during the visioning too, when we were meeting with the teachers for that, because, the introduction of the auditorium was all new. you know, for us, you know, based on the concept study we got from DRA, you know, 2 years ago or something like that. It didn't have an auditorium, so that was one of the things. A good thing about doing the visioning that was there is as we did it, all of a sudden certain things became relevant or aware to us that we weren't aware of before, this being one of them. So.
Yeah, even with 350, that's a smaller than US auditorium. And then the total enrollment for the building would be less than the US is right now. So if that makes sense, but have to limit differences.
You can keep going, Andrew, if you have others. Sorry, no more questions, I think, on the first floor.
Okay. I think that's the extent of what I've got on the building update. Now I'm wishing that you guys had shared the presentation and I just said next slide.
Totally fine.
So that was pretty much the end
Okay.
of the slide deck. When we email it out, it will have the schedule in there. But again, as I said at the beginning, we're aiming for October 18th for the schematic design. And then we've scheduled out from January onwards for the pickup of DD and all the way to construction. And you've already seen that schedule, so we can include that. But really, we're just barreling towards this October 18th deadline. Lots to do.
Looking good.
Also in the appendix, which we don't have to go over, are the plans from the July 1st. So we'll include those as well, so that you can be reminded of where we were and how we landed here.
Any other questions for the architects? Comments on schematic design that we were just looking at? Double check online, make sure nobody has a hand raised.
Thank you as always for your board.
Good comments. Thank you, guys.
All right, keep moving on. So item 4, B, MSBA update. So as everyone remembers from our last meeting, we got invited by MSBA into, I think it's called their senior study or something like that, where they're going to be coming to the district to visit the Cunningham School. It's basically the next step on our statement of interest. So they're coming 17th or 17th, yeah. So they'll be coming to Cunningham. I believe it's 12:30 to 3:30 that they're coming. So there's, you know, a certain amount of us that are going to attend with them, you know, to kind of walk through and, you know, give them the tour. So we're meeting with Dr. Redden, scoping out a list of things to see there, specifically even the 4th floor Cunningham that we're looking at for renovation, and just basically walk them through the school at that point. So as far as our update with MSBA, that's kind of what I have. See if anybody has questions or comments.
Is this a new application or the original?
It's the one that we submitted in April. So when you submit to MSBA, they get them all in April. They go at my guess, I don't know exactly, but they go through the applications that come in over the summer into the fall, and then it's like a filtering process. So this is the first pass that they filtered out certain people that don't get the site visit, and we got invited to it. So the last time we got invited to it was in 2020. I think what Scott talked about last time that he corrected us at the meeting. So in 2020, when they came out, it was during COVID. So we had to hold they had an iPad held up, you know, to give them the tour, which really wasn't impactful. And there weren't kids in the class. So it doesn't, you know, made it hard to kind of really show what the overcrowding was. This time they'll actually be able to get into the school, walk around, see the classrooms, see the converted spaces, see the professional spaces and stuff like that. So then essentially, because we've made it past that first filter, the final one is in December, and that's where the board meets and they vote to see who gets an invitation into their core program for renovation. So potentially in December, we could be invited into their core program, in which case that's a kind of big decision point for us at the time.
Is that something that's available that you have that I could see as our application? I'm just trying to bring myself up to
I can
speed.
read forward, I'll forward it.
Do you? I'm just trying to get up to speed with everything. Thanks.
Maybe ask for it.
Hmm?
Katie reached out to him. after.
Oh, she did. Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Any other questions on MSBA? I'll check on them. All right, hearing none. Moving on. So item 4C, which are our fall town meeting articles. So at our last meeting, we discussed the potential of having 2 articles for a fall town meeting, one for an interim project funding, which is basically the amount for the architects in the OPM to kind of continue through design development, or DD as we call it. And then the second one is, talking about full project funding. There are drafts that I have with them, so just share my screen. Article 1. Yeah, so this one that's here, so what we'd be doing tonight is basically voting to recommend these to the select board, along with the caveat that, obviously, town council would have to review them and probably make minor edits and stuff to them. The other one that we're working on with Arrow Street and also PMA Consultants is the final number. We know it's somewhere around 4 million, maybe a little higher. So that's kind of where we're at. This would, as Shanali referenced, they're holding January as a starting point to get going again and stuff like that. So essentially they were on their submittal on the 18th of October, their contract is complete. So they stopped work at that point. So from October till whenever we get this next funding, we're doing for design. So all the design that you're seeing basically stops. And, we need to pick that back up to kind of keep the project moving. So I'll just kind of open it up, see if anybody has any questions just on this article regarding just the funding for the design development. Double check, make sure.
I mean, I myself would have difficulty voting on it because I haven't seen
Seen.
this project funding article that's up here.
It's basically more of the intent of what we're doing. So
Okay.
the final article actually gets, for us, this is the article for just saying, this is the amount of money we're looking for. It's basically the exact same article that we did the previous funding for.
Yep.
It's just the amount has changed and the description is from schematic design to design development.
I'm just saying I haven't seen it, so I had to vote.
Okay.
Again, just the number 4 million.
Yeah, so part of this is that number, like these are draft articles that we
Yeah.
submit up to them, and that number we get formalized as we're getting our final numbers in from the architect and the OPM.
And I suppose now's the time to bring it up because I brought it up the last time. The 173 is a new fact. And from what I hear, it'll be difficult to pass. And I'm just wondering if we're, do we have a plan B? Because, come what I hear is most likely it'll fail. Might pass again the second time, but it'll fail. And then where are we? And that's my concern. And I think should be all of our concerns because it's likely. From what I hear. So I'm just, we're, again, after
The only way to test that is to put it to a vote. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean?
I know, but-
Word on the street is one thing, but a public vote is something totally different. So.
history is an indication.
Understood. You know,
It'll fail.
but, that was part of the reason we were pushing to try to get it in November, to get it out to a vote, to kind of see the true litmus test for this thing.
And-
So at some point, we have to go to a vote.
Correct, but I've also learned in this short amount of time that it takes a long time to get the public to know.
Mhm.
And I'm all in favor of a vote, but first everybody has to know. It was too quick for them to know. Everybody, all of us know because we're active in it and we're involved in it, but I walk down the streets and I talk to people and they have no idea what's going on. So, that's the challenge, is letting people know so they can vote.
So if you go back to my presentation to the select board that I gave, there was a timeline that dealt with engagement of the public. So we didn't want to start doing that until we knew it was going to a vote, right? Because if we did it now and there was no vote in November, people would forget about it. So again, with a campaign like that, you have to ramp it up to when the vote's going to be. You don't want to do it 6 months before, then go dormant and then call a vote 6 months later. So if you look at the presentation they gave to the select board, it had a timeline of everything. And the last portion of that timeline, after hopefully it got on and for the secretary, was a full engagement campaign to do all that. So we fully recognize, it's going to be a lot. The number, I'm sure a lot more people are aware of it now too, hearing what the number was. So, that's why for me, it's just more of, it's a large number. But at the same time, when you look at it, the big thing you hear me start saying about this isn't an expense. This is 100% investment in the town, right? This is a facility that's going to house 700 kids over the next 50, 60, 70 years that building's going to be there. Figure out how many kids that is, and then do the percentage, the expenditure per those kids, right? That's the thing that a lot of people, when they talk about this and get scared by the number, this thing is an investment. And that's what you're going to hear from me through this whole thing. That this is not an expense. We're not taking 173 million and burning it in the backyard. We're building a school for kids. So for me, everyone's going to have their own take on, where this is going to line up, how they're going to vote. Let them vote. But the article we're talking about now, the article we're talking about now is just to keep the design going. So if part of the concern is, what is the plan B? As of October 18th, when their funding runs out, there's no plan B because we don't have money. We have no more architects, we have no more professionals. So what we're trying to do with this article is to get funding to kind of keep us going, right?
But the plan B is outside of this.
It potentially it could be part of this, but you know what I mean? There are options that we're looking at for other things. For example, we've started looking at reducing the costs. If you remember, we started at over 200,000 square feet. We brought it down to 167. We're bringing it down even further. So part of the refinement, we understand cost is a concern, and we've been working on refining that. I don't know what your square footages were there, and
They're close to the 127 for the middle school.
yep.
So combined with the preschool, 152, I think we're a little, like a couple thousand over, but again, as we're refining, if we were 20,000 over, that would be a bit different story, but I think we're just a couple thousand. We're still massaging that center core. As you heard, we had some extra prep spaces, so.
Yeah.
We're in the ballpark.
Checking. Glenn texted me. I just want to make sure he didn't have his hand up. So, so essentially, the article that we're talking about here, this is one that we all talked about at our last meeting. So this, for us, like, I understand the language is the first thing you're seeing here, but this was all talked about at the previous meeting. So, oh, yeah, thanks. Tim?
Yeah, Sean, I thought, and maybe I misunderstood, I thought part of the reason for continuing to fund the design effort was to assist in answering the questions that I think it was the select board had about some of these costs, both operational and construction hard costs.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And I would actually talk to them about, if the questions are gonna delay and cost money, I would talk to them about withdrawing those questions. Well, it's only Roxanne's the only one that asked any questions.
Not trying to be cute. We're still waiting for that to
Just generalizing the board and,
Yeah.
and, you know, I have to be honest, this item coming up about the classroom needs assessment and my analysis
Mhm.
changed everything for me personally.
Okay.
That's the main question.
But the main.
Not the report, but my analysis that I just quickly did of the classrooms and the class sizes based on the population, and that's why I was looking for the population today.
Mhm.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and we'll get into the classroom assessment
Yeah.
portion of it.
Yeah.
So essentially, our main one here, again, just bringing it back, that we're talking about an article to get additional funding for the architects to keep kind of moving on.
Yeah, to be clear, without this funding, we're not doing it. We're not answering any more questions. We're not refining the project, bigger or smaller. We're doing nothing.
We're on hold.
Yeah.
And we are going to be on hold from October 18th until whenever this funding article gets fixed.
Yeah, and we know that every day we lose, is a day of escalation in construction costs, and, you know, what was a $173 million project, because it's not going to be built by August of 2027.
Mhm.
We really probably shouldn't be saying 173, because probably an extra, I don't know if it's 2.5% or 5% escalation, so that's another 5 million, you know, $8 million that we just kind of added on to here. So now we're kind of closer to 180. Any delay is not good for our kids, not good for our staff. We're gonna walk through these buildings all the time. It is stuffed to the brim. We have the largest student enrollments, third largest in Milton's history. Second largest in Milton's history, third largest kindergarten class in Milton's history. Like, we are larger than we were last year. It's not going down. You keep saying it's going down. Great to go down, because that would mean kids have more space, staff have more space. Not happening. It's hopeful thinking. It's not solutions-based thinking, in my opinion. I think we gotta move forward in some direction. I'm completely with you, Sean. Like, my preference is to get in front of, because I hear the opposite, John. I hear people all the time saying how much we need the school and how much we vote for it. And so, like, I think both those things are true. I think it's true you're hearing that. I think it's true I'm hearing me.
Mhm.
And I agree with Sean. Like, we don't have any polling in this town. It'd be great if we had polling. We don't have that. So the only way to poll is to get in front of people and vote, which is, and it gets back to the idea of getting in front of town meeting and the fall with a full funding article, because then at least we get feedback from town meeting. And that is at least a larger representative body than, you know, this group, school committee and select board, which at this point are the only three groups that have voted on this. And two of those three have voted to support it. So, you know, I will make the motion to recommend this warrant article to the select board for a fall. That's right.
With one friendly comment with edits by town council, just in case
With
there's
edits
anything.
by town
Yeah.
clerk.
Second,
Any other discussion? And only one thing I would note is the approving people that you're saying on there, once this goes, just for other people that might not know, this will go in front of the warrant committee. The warrant committee will be voting on it too.
Yes, the select board is the one that votes to put it on the warrant.
Correct.
The warrant committee just votes to support it or recommend it or not recommend it.
Recommend it or not
Or-
recommend it. Yep. Any other discussion for the roll call vote? All right, so we'll roll call vote, Mark Warren,
Yes.
Terry Hurley,
Yes.
John
I'm
Coney,
gonna abstain.
Tim Lombard,
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman,
Yes.
Sean O'Rourke is a yes. I'm just double checking to see if Aqua was able to join. I don't see him on there, so, yeah. All right, our second article is, as we discussed, was in Article 4. What's that? This is essentially I think, Mark, you talked about it last time, and, you know, Kerry, you mentioned it too. So we looked at basically drafting an article that's reflective of a debt exclusion article that was done for the fire station building committee. It's basically same form and feel, larger number, of course. But it's basically there for the appropriation for the entire project that's here. So just for everyone's understanding, if the 4.5 million that we just, 4 million, you know, call it 4.5 million, somewhere in that window, if that did get appropriated, that would then get rolled into this. So it's not additive. It's not 173 plus 4.5 million. That's some of the language we'll need town council to kind of weigh in on this one too. Essentially with this, the article basically spells out what the project is, the funding request, description of the property, and then the recommendation that's down there again kind of follows what was there previously for the fire station building committee for their projects.
My question kind of gets back to my point on the escalation. Is the original estimate of 173 million assumed a certain start date? Right. Do we believe that with the current timing, we're able to meet that start date, or are we 6 months? Like, I don't know. I guess my question is, I know there's no way we're going to meet obviously August of 2027, right? Not missing by a year. It doesn't really help us because, you know, the groundbreaking might, I guess, not be delayed as much as the opening of the building, and that's not usually when the kind of escalation is kind of works. But anyways, just wondering that as it relates to kind of this number, is that could mean that we actually need to cut the project in order to meet the 173, given now we've added escalation time to this.
So my take on it is the 173 million that was there had a certain amount of contingency built into it, right? And if this were to pass, say so a couple things too. So if this were to pass in the fall town meeting, it would be good essentially for 90 days. And within that 90-day window, the select board would have to call a ballot question for the public to vote on. If they do not call a ballot question, it would essentially expire. So, you know, it's only good for 90 days. But my take is, if we were to do this at the fall town meeting, if it were to pass and there was a ballot question within 90 days, I think we're in a tight enough window there where before we were saying we do in November, if we got all of the funding, you know, 90 days later or something like that. I'm not that worried about, you know, the escalation cost you're bringing up. If it delayed it by 2 or 3 years,
yeah,
I'd be a little more like, yeah, we might want a larger number there to cover that. But, you know, just on that kind of timeline, that's where I was comfortable with something.
Here is a possible reduction of scope, correct?
Yeah.
That might
So-
offset that 173.
And the key thing with this, as I said before, it's the ceiling. So it's 173 million. It's an authorization to issue debt. It's not a blank check it's not a $173 million check. It's basically a budget number that you have to work to. So yeah, if we can keep it lower and certain things come out that we don't want to have as part of it. For example, if we could share the auditorium and cut out the auditorium.
Well, I don't want to do that.
I'm
I
not
love
saying
the
you-
arts
I'm
and my kids are in drama, so I'm not proposing that that's a great idea. I'm just trying to be frugal because I know that everybody's talking about this number.
Yep.
So I don't want to get rid of it. I would build 2 of them if I could. I think we need arts a lot more than we need a lot of things in this town.
Okay. Yeah, but essentially, you know, in response to your question for the 173 million, that's kind of my thought process on it. Anyone has
And a
anything?
bigger gym.
Hmm.
And a bigger gym.
Two level gym, right? Stacked on top of each other.
Oh, I spend a lot of time in Taunton. It's massive.
We had more land.
I know. They have a lot.
Cut down like greenhouse gases.
I'll make a motion to recommend this warrant article as well to the select board and submit it to the warrant committee, for the fall town meeting.
Second.
Carry seconds, right? Any other discussion? Again, just I'll keep an eye online just in case I miss somebody.
And I think with this one too, we need the caveat that town council may make some edits.
Correct.
And then recommend accept.
Sorry, Tim dropped off. Just text me.
We did.
Yeah, but
So-
Glenn's still on, so we do have a forum, so we're good. Right.
Yes.
Thanks, Glenn. All right, any other discussion? And hearing none, so we'll go to roll call vote. Mark Warren.
Yeah.
Carrie Hurley.
Yes.
John
And not
Cohen.
having seen it, I have to abstain until I can see it.
That's fine. Glenn Hoffman
Yes.
and Sean O'Rourke, yes. All right, stop sharing. Go back to the agenda. Here's some easy votes. Review and approve project invoices, both for PMA. Invoice number 7, which was for the work done in July of this year, and invoice number 8 for August of this year. They were in your packets, so. Yeah, any comments?
It's just one thing to note, they are listed as draft, just because I haven't gotten the final from my accounting department.
Okay.
So I won't submit them to the town until I get the actual final, but the value won't change.
Okay. Yep, Mark.
I know, y'all sent the budget, the master project budget doc. The build to date, does that include these or not include?
It would include those, yes.
I'll make a motion to approve PMA invoice 007 and 008.
I will second.
Seconds, any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Mark Loring,
Yes.
Carrie Hurley,
Yes.
John Cohen, Glenn Hoffman,
Yes.
and Sean O'Rourke, yes. All right, moving right along. Item 5, item 5, new business, A, discussion classroom needs assessment 8/27/24 report. So as everyone knows, they got a copy of the classroom assessment report that was sent to the select board. Yeah, no problem. That was sent to the select board for their review. So we had a copy of that got sent to us to kind of take a look at. So I forwarded that to everybody so they had a copy of it. Myself being in the numbers, so this brings back essentially memories from like 3 or 4 years ago, like after our first year, where we kind of ran through these numbers, dove into it. So I get a presentation because for me, the graphics just speak easier. So let me dive into it. I'll share my screen. Double check to see. Just double check Tim or nope. All right. So share the screen. All right, so as everyone's aware, with this graph that we have here, this is the overall enrollment for the town. It updated every year for town meeting. We go through it. The main one that we talk about every time is that horizontal yellow line at 1900, which is the elementary school capacity. So that's the key one when we're looking at this. Our goal is to get all the buildings back to their as design capacities, not their, what they're being used for today. So what we did, and it's I'm trying to understand what was going on with, DRA's study previously. We were looking at some stuff. All right. All right. So as we went through, you have to understand what the buildings were built for previously. So the buildings, if you take the original floor plans and walk through those floor plans, looking at them for what are used as classroom spaces, grades 1 through 5, kindergarten or preschool classes, which are a different size classroom that have dedicated bathrooms to them. Other rooms that are there are music, computer labs, cafeterias, and special ed. So as we've gone through these before, and basically, had the color coding that we have here for what the spaces are. So as we add up all those spaces that are there, and I apologize for kind of running through these quick, but they'll be printed and provided. But the summation of them, when you look at those classrooms for Glover, Tucker, Cunningham, and Collegod, you come up with a total number of 77 classrooms for grades 1 through 5, and kindergarten and preschool classrooms about 17. When you look at the total students per classroom, what the buildings were designed for, they were designed for approximately 21 students in a classroom for grades 1 through 5, and 18 students in kindergarten and preschool. So when you take those numbers, when you take those numbers and multiply the kids in the classroom by the number of classrooms, you come up with the building capacity is. Similarly, for preschool or kindergarten, about 18 kids, 17 classrooms. Get that going again. Brings you to 356. Total enrollment is 2311. The thing when I'll walk through the remainder of this, but this is more just a summary slide here. When you're looking at the analysis that was done by the citizens, they use the actual enrollment of 2018 as their starting point. All right. When they're doing that, it doesn't acknowledge the overcrowding that existed at those times. So at those times, you had 338 extra kids in grades 1 through 5 over the building capacity. You also had 50 extra kids in preschool or kindergarten. And there, again, there was over capacity. So roughly unaccounted for, there's about 400 kids. When they did their analysis, that's where some of the confusion, I think, came out, that they weren't accounting for classrooms that were already existing at the time. So
Can you go back to that?
Sure.
The 19, what is that?
23.
1955, their actual enrollment.
Yep.
Classrooms 1 through 5. Okay, I get it.
So page 7 of the DRA space needs study looked at, had 3 columns for it. It had current usage, assumed program, and then essentially the shortfall, which is the delta between the two. The report that we got utilized current usage as basically, the starting point of the analysis. The problem with that is that current usage was in what was being used in 2018. So when you look at them for 2018, there are already a number of classrooms that were converted at that time. It's not used. The presentation of this, I could see how it gets confusing. The architects, when they gave this presentation to the school committee, you got to remember they gave this in 2019, where the school committee was on board. There were multiple previous presentations or working groups to get them to where they were. So I don't think they understood the audience that would be looking at this, what are we, 5 years later now, right? So looking at it 5 years later, they probably would have been better to have an initial column of what were the buildings built for, what is their current usage in 2018, what is the assumed program, and then kind of see what those differentials are there. The other one that plays in, so the report that we're reviewing it looked at grade sizes. So as you saw previously when I was calculating, we had 18 in kindergarten and we had 21 in the grades 1 through 5. Their analysis looked at kindergarten with 22 and grades 1 through 5 with 23 students. Again, the problem with that is that was based on 2018 of current usage at 2018, not what the buildings were designed for. So the starting point of their analysis, it just started at the wrong point. So that the way they calculate everything out, the arithmetic to come up with the classrooms is correct, but the process by which they're started off on was wrong. So their analysis that they looked at, basically focused in on kindergarten and classrooms grade 1 through 5. So part of what I was trying to do too is confirm, the grades, these grade configuration of class sizes when they did that. So when I looked through, this is the page 4 of our DRA space needs study. The numbers for the long-term projection, 1990, that you see here, were for grades 1 through 5 only. The kindergarten that was here was 378. So when you take the total classrooms that were envisioned before, the 95 that we just talked about, take 1990 divided by 95, the way they came to that is they had 21 kids per classroom. Kindergarten had 20 classrooms, and when you look at that, it assumes a classroom size of 19. So those two assumptions that they for space sizes align with what schools were designed for. So when you look at the graphs or the mathematics that they use for it, like I said, they were computing a delta. So they were taking the projected number here, 1944, which was a 3-year projection, and then 1990, which was a 10-year projection. They were subtracting off a certain number, 1821 in both of these. That 1821 is this point on the graph. If you remember from previously, the calculated capacity for grades 1 through 5 was something about 1,600. So what happens is that's where their numbers come off. So like I said, the arithmetic they were using to do it was right. You're taking a projected minus an actual to come up with a delta and dividing it by number of kids per classroom. Just the numbers they were using were off. The other one to note too is in the study they said they focused on, I think it was pages 4, 7, and 8, or 4, 6, and 7. Page 3 is more the important one that's there. So page 3, which is shown on the right, includes preschools. So the numbers, when you add up the numbers and look at it from the graph they were looking at on the left, the graph on the left are two separate graphs. There's the black line, which is grades 1 through 5. And then there's the yellow line, which is kindergarten. If you know, preschool is not included there. So if you add those two numbers up on the yellow dots that are there, you come up with the total enrollment of 2177, which is not right. The total enrollment at that time for all the schools, pre-K to 5th grade, was actually 2457. It was a difference of 134 for preschool. So again, when you go back and you look at the calculated capacity of the schools at 1923, you focus in that 2018 number that's there. That's where you start seeing where the differentials are, or why their numbers were off or what they were doing. So when you plug those baseline numbers back in from what we had for baseline capacity for the schools, the numbers actually work out. So the previous, their calculation was 0.9, not 4. Our calculation shows 3.68, 3.7. So basically 4, right? The other one that we looked at when we did the same capacity numbers there, our numbers came out to 16 and 18, which are actually higher. So it shows you the architects were using a little more conservative of a number there. So, as I dug through these and looking, it, again, became clear that they were looking at this, and they noted it in their text that they're looking at what's in the district now. So the quote from that is from the meetings of the school committee at the time. The meeting that they referenced there from the school committee is when DRA came in to give the presentation to the school committee to say, here's our study, ask us questions and all that. I recommend everybody go back and watch it. I watched it this weekend, again, just to get further context and to confirm some of the stuff that we were looking at there. So this is where, for me, they're looking at stuff as it was in 2018, not when the schools originally were built and designed. So a couple of last slides. Again, when we're looking at this, in 2018, you can see we were roughly 400 kids, as I said, 388 over capacity at that time that we had. And as a reference point to people in 2018, these are what our rooms look like. We had art in our cart. We had kids in the stage, sitting on the floor. We had classrooms in libraries. We had classrooms in gymnasiums. So with all this, this is kind of, what, if we were to take those numbers and just say, yeah, they're right, this is what we'd be going back to, not to what the buildings originally were done for, were built for. So with that, I'll just open up, see if anybody has any questions.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you're gonna share it, so I can, like I said,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I gotta process it.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but like, I just want to let you know is like, we had dove into this literally we've been doing this now for 5.5 years, right? We did this for about 4 years ago. Specifically, when I took over as chair, is I wanted to make sure, similar to what you're doing, do your due diligence, understand that what the baseline or what we're operating from is right, so we don't run off in the wrong direction. So that's why for me, it was easy to kind of jump into this and basically dig back up, my numbers, the same stuff you're doing, I've already done. So I'm happy to trade notes as much.
Yeah, and me too, with
Yeah.
mine, yeah.
Yeah.
Because this kind of was a sidetrack. My main focus was where are we?
Yep.
Like, where are we right now? That's what I started looking into.
Yeah, so a couple things just to add on, I think, great points. I think a couple things in addition to what you're saying is none of this addresses students with disabilities, right? Which is a huge part of our space constraints in terms of the need for spaces outside of the regular classroom. Mandated spaces, right, based on IEPs. Our percent of students with disability is a straight line up, right? You just go through the DESI profile. All this stuff is publicly available, very easy to find. If you want to use 2018 as the metric, which I agree is like not a good baseline, so not when the buildings were built, but that was 15.4 in a smaller district. In 2024, we're at 18.6. Very short amount of time we've grown. That's a difference of about 150 kids. In addition, that require special needs services. And that's just K through 12. That's not counting the pre-K extension. The pre-K, I think when the building was originally built, needed 2 pre-K classes, and now we're at 7, right? And those are very specific class sizes, restrictions, as you heard when we did the building tour with John Redden, Dr. Redden, and he talked about those, like how big you can make those spaces, what the mandates are from the state regarding square footage. So all of those are additional impacts on spaces that did not exist when the building was built, and they're things that have only gotten worse since 2018, since the original assessments. Enrollments, again, as we talked about, it was in 2018, 4211. It's now 43. Last year was 4317. This year it's 4430 as of the beginning of school. So these things aren't going away. School building committee was started 5 years ago because of 6 years ago. This one, right?
5.5.
5.5. Because of building constraints that just have not changed, and again, they've only escalated. I also got to say, John, like, just my feedback from like how you went about this is that I first heard that at a select board meeting of these like questions that you went to outside people and commissioned a study essentially versus like bringing that up in this group. Like,
You have to realize when I bring things up in this group, it's usually not received well. As in the last time with your email the very next morning about what I said, Richard said about 173 million. I mean, that's a classic example of how, and besides which, this is a committee that reports to the select board.
It does not.
Huh?
It does not.
Okay.
Sorry, we're appointed by the town moderator. So we report to town meeting.
All right, there's the room for argument there.
Yeah, happily.
So if I'm going to present something, I'm going to present it to the select board.
But you have questions about the school building project. Again, being the newest member, which I totally understand you're trying to get up to speed. But like, you could have come here with these questions with your data and said like, hey, this is my findings, like what's going on. You you could have talked to Peter and Glenn and Katie from the school department after the fact though, John, and like you could have talked to Sean and Carrie and like these people have been doing, I've only been doing it now for a little over a year, so I don't mean to make myself the expert here. But
At
you know,
the
these people doing
at the last meeting, you made it clear, this committee is 100% behind this new building. So therefore, any ideas outside of that don't come here.
Yeah, I guess I
So
wouldn't.
if I could,
You know, I mean,
no, but if I could chime in on that, John, as you stated in this meeting, you're getting up to speed. This committee has been working for 5.5 years.
I'm
So
sorry I missed that.
we've been working for 5.5 years. So
And I appreciate that.
I
I
understand,
appreciate
but
that. And I've
there
tried to
has to
state
be, there has to be a certain amount of respect for the work this committee's done over 5 years to understand that we've pressure tested this, we've looked at it. And over those 5 years, we're working towards a solution and we've come to a solution. Town meeting actually supported that solution, you know, I think by voting on a land swap, which you also voted on too. So I think you supported. I understand your concerns of, would it be better to augment buildings to do that? That's a discussion we went through 3 years ago. So we went through that 3 years ago by adding on to the buildings, right? Putting additional classrooms on. We further tax the common spaces, like cafeterias and stuff like that. Whereas theoretically, could we build on a bunch of spaces onto the buildings and put 26 classrooms in? Possibly. Would it work? No, because now you're running cafeteria classes for kids eating at 10 in the morning. They're already at 10:30, so that means they're going to go to 10, right? You ever see a kid eat at 10 and last until 2:30 in the afternoon? So my point is, all the things that are being brought up, we have covered all this. We have exhausted all this. The funny part that as we went through the land swap and I was talking with people about it, the acknowledgement that we needed a new school was evident. Everybody says it. The chair of the select board says it, right? Yes, we need a new school. Everybody has said that, right? When the land swap was going on, it was more of, yes, we need a new school. Is this the right spot? That's what everybody was saying, right? Because the ideas of augmenting the schools just doesn't work. And that's kind of the exhaustion that we went through again 3 years ago. Now, if you and others want to go about it, please go. Honestly, I'm not saying not to, but again, we're not going to go back studying stuff that we've done 3 or 4 years ago and go back in time and hold up everything else that we're doing. That's not our plan. The tone of that report goes to select board. Honestly, it should have came to us because it was like the select board doesn't understand the detail that we've done. They don't. We're charged with dealing with this, not the select board, right? And the tone of that of hold all expenditures, don't pay the consultants, reappoint the entire school building committee and stuff like that. That's a bit drastic.
that's a little.
That's what, John,
I know.
that is what got submitted, and that is what you took on.
That's not what I said.
I understand, but this is
Correct.
this is the torch you're carrying, or
I know.
it seems you're
I
carrying,
know.
right?
I know.
So for us, you've come on, you've asked for specific things from us, right? You asked for the financials, we got you all the financials that
But
we,
the new,
if I, let me just finish making my point, and I'll stop
Okay.
after this one.
okay,
You asked for financials, we got you that stuff. We've asked for other things, we've got you everything you asked for. Over a month ago, I've asked for dates for town meetings. I've asked for dates for warrant articles. I've asked for dates of this. I've asked for a to-do list. You've had 2 meetings at select board. Not once has it shown up on an agenda. When will it show up on an agenda?
I can't, at this point with what's newly developed, I can't promise. Truthfully,
You are our liaison
I know.
to the select board.
I know.
So you're saying you will not present this to the select board?
not right now.
Questions? That is concerning. That is, I mean, your job is to relay our needs to the select board, and you're saying you will not do that.
I can't, what do you
Aren't
ask
you
me
just
to
a
relate to
conduit?
them? Huh?
Aren't you just the conduit?
Am I?
You
I
make a
mean,
decision
the last
on what
time,
comes and goes.
it went on before the board, Nick did it totally on his own. The last time it went up there, so I assumed he'd do it this time, to be honest with you.
You are our liaison, you and Glenn Hoffman. So the makeup of this committee, that's why every time I give a presentation, I go over the makeup.
Can I,
Sure, yeah, I'll stop.
so this all started 5.5 years ago. What was the number? What was the budget? What was it?
We didn't have a program 5.5 years ago.
There was no discussion at all of any number.
Nope.
Okay.
What
Was a recent, when was the most recent number that was used?
It was done when we did the land swap and we looked at square footage costs that were published by MSBA.
And what was the number we were working on?
80 to 90 million. And that was construction costs of the building. Square foot.
What changed is 173 million.
Correct.
That's what changed. And it's a threat that this won't get approved. And then where are we? 6, 8, 9 months, a year from now. Where are we? It's a very strong likelihood that it won't. If history is any indicator.
So let it fail. If it won't get approved, then we know.
I just don't understand.
Hold on, one at a time.
Yeah.
One at a time.
I'm just.
So then,
at this point, it's your opinion, and it's the opinion of other people you hear from, which is like potentially the right opinion. Maybe you're correct, maybe I'm wrong, but we do not know until we vote. And when we vote, at that point, if it fails, that provides a decision point where we can say like, okay, this project is not going to get support, and we can pivot to something else. But it doesn't make sense to abandon something that you spent this much time on when you're this close. If you can just ask people and say like, hey, what do y'all think about this?
And that's why I bring up my topic earlier about it takes time to let the people know. And the 173 just came out. It takes time to let people know. That's why November was too fast, because people didn't know. Yes, I want them to vote, but people need to be let know. I walk down my street, I talk to people. They have no idea what's going on. I'm just saying. That's you're asking me where I stand, and that's where I stand.
Understood. So just to be clear, we're gonna decide a new president, right? A new Democratic electee in a shorter time frame than what we would have had if we put this on the ballot in August.
What is that point? The point being?
That you're saying there's not enough time to understand this if we were to put it on in August for the November election, right?
You're comparing letting people know about the school to the president of the United States, letting people know about. It's kind of a little bit of a stretch.
There was time to do it, but
I'm just saying that you're using that as a comparison, and it's quite a stretch.
That's fine. So
I'm saying we need to think about an alternative. So, ladies and gentlemen.
So to be clear, the requests that we sent to you, I will send them to the chair of that, and I'll send them to the remainder of the select board.
Fine.
Perfect.
So, John, can I ask a question? Are we operating in a situation where anything that we need to go to the select board going forward has to pass your judgment before it will go? I'm just trying to understand. You just said you're not
gonna have to be the only conduit. It hasn't been that case. That I'm the only, but you're making it sound like I'm the only conduit to the select board, and that's not the case.
So just I'm gonna go back.
I mean, you just said you don't report to the select board, right?
I guess it's historical.
It is
The person who sat in your
It is
seat
historical, right?
was that person.
Right.
Who, if we had a conversation in this meeting
Yeah.
and we talked about materials going back to the select board, that person who used to be in your seat
Yeah.
was in charge of doing that.
And now there's a different person there.
So just to be clear, the makeup of this committee, right? The committee was formed in February 2019, 5.5 years ago. By town meeting, the makeup of that committee are 5 members that are appointed by the town moderator, right?
Mhm.
Gary, myself, Aqua, Tim, Scott. There are 2 members from the school committee, Mark and Selena. there were, as part of the makeup of that, as it went through the warrant committee, were requests to have school committee representation on there, and then also select board representation on there. Yourself and Glenn Hoffman are the two appointees to this committee. Good. So as appointee to the committee, your job is a liaison between us and the select board. That's part of that role that was done to form this committee. So if I may, so other committees you sit on, do you do the same exact thing for any of the other committees that you sit on when they ask you to bring something to the select board, or do you consistently say no to them too? Because at this point, it seems deliberate that we just wasted a month for this. We asked you these things over a month ago. Correct. I have the emails I sent. Okay. It's been now a month and nothing's come. And now a month later, you're saying you will not send this. You got to understand the frustration.
I know. I'm just as I was abstaining from that vote, I'm just not 100% behind all of this, like you are.
But that is
not besides the point.
Your opinion aside, that's my point. You've got a whole voting population in Milton.
Yeah.
Because you don't agree with it. You're not going to put it up to the select board. Is that I'm just trying to understand this.
Am I the only one that can do that? You telling me that I'm the only one that can do that?
What it is that it's not.
No, I just told you, historically, that is how it
But I'm asking you, am I the only one that can do that?
There is what I would call a professional courtesy between your boards or committees, that the relaying of information would essentially flow through the liaisons. If you're saying that's not happening, it's fine. We can send it to the select board.
Let me rephrase it. At this point, I can't agree with going forward with full funding on this project for $173 million. That's I'm as an elected official, as a board member, that is my prerogative, and I just can't support that right now.
I guess you're missing my point, which is I don't really care what your opinion is. I care about the process. And if you can't represent this committee with just information, you don't have to have an opinion on it. But you do, we were under the impression, unless you said to us, I'm not going to do it a month ago when we started this conversation, you should have been upfront then that you weren't going to do this a month ago. But we're all under the impression that the way things have worked for 5.5 years was that we have a conversation, whatever information that we need to flow up to select board and back down, and a response would be through that liaison on the select board.
I guess the problem that I'm having is how do I present them something that I don't agree with?
You can publicly say at the meeting that you don't agree with it.
Well,
You've done it.
I have been asked by the school building committee to come to the select board with this query.
That I don't agree with.
I don't care if you agree with it or not.
Yeah.
But I would say that, but I would have to say that is what I'm saying. You right? I mean, I would present it in that
I'm so
fashion,
confused
yes.
by the voting rights of this town and how process works. Because if we're going to continue, we need to understand if you're never going to present, I guess you've cleared it up. Actually, I'm going to back off. You're right. I think it's absurd that that's your approach.
Respectfully, I don't mean to badger you, John. I appreciate the transparency with which you're communicating today, so we understand your position and kind of how to act moving forward. And that lets us know, right, that you do not want to be in conduit. That's helpful, then we know that. So I think that clarity pushes us forward and allows us to move forward. I do think, right, as it stands, like our goal to get this to a public vote at some point requires select board 4 out of 5 of them to vote, to allow the town to vote, right? Not vote to support the project. Select board can still recommend to the town, vote no. But select board, you know, through Milton laws, has to at least allow vote 4 to 5, 2/3 to put it out to the town, right? And so I guess my question to you from a process question is like, you know, a lot of what we heard at the select board meeting when it was voted down to put it on the November vote was, things like timeline, like too fast, we have questions that need to be answered. You're now saying, though, you don't support the project. And so I guess my question is like, are there actually questions that we could answer or things about the project that would need to be changed, or like, what is it that would, I know you can't speak for the whole select board, but you can speak for yourself with saying like, that would allow you to vote yes to allowing the town to vote on the project. That's, to me, that is the key question for you, Roxanne, and Richard, to see at least how we get 2 out of those. And, you know, if there's turnover in the select board, obviously anybody new who comes on, to say, how do we get 4 out of 5 members to agree that this project is at least refined enough to go out to the town, regardless of your individual.
Or I believe, Sean, you just have to send the questions directly to the chair of the select board, correct?
Well, that's where I'm going. But I think Mark's point, and just going back a month ago, right? Like after the vote from the select board to not put on November ballot, which is, we understood, it's fine, it happened, nothing we can do about it at that point. But for us as a committee, yeah, just real quick, for us as a committee at that point, as I mentioned a month ago, was to say, all right, there are 3 no votes. How do we get them to a yes? And essentially, what do they need to know? Because my understanding from the chair, before he acknowledged we need to do school, he just didn't want to do it then. He wanted to do it in the future. So the remaining votes would be you and Roxanne. You at the meeting here said, if there's not a debt exclusion in May, you will put it on the ballot. Right? So that answered my 2 questions there. So, you know, as far as I understand it, come May, if there's no debt, if there's no operational override, you've already stated that you put it on the ballot in May.
I will, but I think we need an alternate plan. I do, because I'm worried that this is not gonna, what happens when it fails? Let's just play devil's advocate. It fails, then what?
So there's already plans in the works, from my understanding, because we have to talk at some point. This project is now delayed over a year, right? So we had, if we were in November and it passed the ballot, our operation was to open fall 2027. We all understand fall 2027 is not happening.
Truthfully though, we just got the land July, early.
Awesome.
Okay, but that just happened. So,
but we kept telling everybody it's going to happen by the end of the month.
I understand, but still nothing could happen until that happened.
Anything could happen then.
But I'm just saying.
No.
No, you know,
but anything could have happened before that, right? You know, but my point going on it was, so your point was for temporary solutions, right? You're talking, if this doesn't pass, what do we do? All of the temporary solutions up to
not temporary. Not temporary.
Let me get to this.
Okay.
All right. The solutions to kind of ride us over until we need a new building, which for me would be temporary, right? The Facilities Advisory Subcommittee of the school committee has been dealing with the conversions and some of the temporary solutions, at least historically for the past 5.5 years, right? They have been carrying that while we've been carrying the overall bigger project. So that's kind of where, you know, people ask, what are we doing in the temporary to fix some of the stuff? We've delegated that to the Facilities Advisory Subcommittee because they were doing it actually years before we came on. So the 2018 presentation that was there talking about rooms that got converted, all those happened before we got formulated. That was Facilities Advisory Subcommittee under Bill Ritchie, covering all that stuff, doing all those build outs and stuff. He would give us information of here's some temporary things that we can look at and stuff to kind of ride us over. But the overall goal of this, we took a vote again 4 years ago that our goal was to build a new building, right? So that's again where some of, you know, the emotion comes out for other people that we've been working for 5.5 years now to build a new building, right? That's been the track we've been going down. The Facilities Advisory Subcommittee has been doing other, you know, the temporary solutions. So the questions, when you have those, I would say, go to the school committee, go to the Facilities Advisory Subcommittee, understand what they've been doing as part of their work there. That will lead into some of the stuff. Yep. Go for it. Say it. Just to make sure I respond to it.
I'm not talking about not building a new building. I'm just talking about an alternative new building. I mean, we could build a new building, but
So start over.
I'm just saying, as an alternate plan, because
What would the new building be?
I don't know. You know, one of the early plans, well,
So-
we'd have to develop that. One of the early plans that were put out there that were ruled out.
One of the early plans, none of the early plans were.
One of the real confusing things to me is we're still talking about all this analysis is all about the elementary school, and we're not doing an elementary school anymore. We're doing 7th and 8th grade, pre-K.
You're pulling it out.
Just to be,
No, I know, but we did all this analysis on the elementary school.
That was from 5 years ago. And we talked about at that point, and we've talked about it since I've joined school committee and before Sean's been talking about it, of how the problem is migrating to the middle school.
I digress.
I digress. The middle school is the largest it's ever been. It grew by 150 kids, so over 100 kids in 1 year, just the middle school. That's coming to the high school. The high school grew by 90 kids. But these are getting bigger. The problem, kids get older, and the problem is continuing upwards. And it's not like kids are getting, like the grades are getting smaller down low. So the solution of the upper middle school was a unique unique idea of trying to solve the problem across all the sites. Because any other plan to expand on any other individual building addresses the space constraints of that building, but it doesn't address the space constraints of any other building. And if you build another elementary school, you address space constraints across the elementary school. You don't address space constraint at Pierce or the high school. You build another middle school, you don't address it at the elementary school. So like you need a project that addresses all of it to make it as cost effective as possible. Because otherwise you're having multiple mobilizations, multiple project designs, right? All that you're compounding the impact to students, to staff, to facilities, you're increasing costs. Like none of those things make the project cheaper. And that's all stuff the committee looked at many times over. Again, you could build a couple classrooms on Cunningham and help Cunningham, but how does that help Tucker? That doesn't help Tucker.
Just saying, 173 is probably not gonna pass, and where are we?
So the question then is, what's the number? In my mind, is like, is it 150? Is it 100? Is it 40? Is it 12? Like, what is the number? Because you could design something to any number. The issue is that we don't actually know that 173 won't pass. We don't know that 150 won't pass. We don't have any feedback from the town. We've gotten feedback from 3 committees: school committee, select board, and school building committee. And out of that, 2 have voted in favor of the project, and 1 had a 3-2 vote against it. So even the majority of those boards are voting in favor of the project. As Sean said, this town meeting voted in favor of the land swap, which you should assume they're not going to do unless they vote generally in favor of like a new school project was going to happen. They might not be in favor of the 173. Maybe that number is too big. It's very possible. Certainly it's bigger than I would like it to be, but we don't know, John, unless we have people say. Like anything else is pure speculation. And it deprives the public the opportunity to.
The complaint about escalation and the complaint about we're doing it a long time is the decision you're making to extend it. Because if it gets turned down, and it's very likely, based on past experience, I know you're gonna say no.
If you were concerned about escalation, we would have voted in November, John. Like you can't.
No,
you're
the one, I'm saying you're the one who's concerned about escalation.
concerned
You're
about
the one who
getting in front
keeps
of the
bringing
town
up
as soon as
escalation.
possible, so that we
let
get to.
John.
Yeah.
Guys.
I've said what I'm gonna
Yeah,
say.
we're all, I think at this point, we're still on item 5A, discussion of classroom assessments, right? I think we got a little off agenda topic in the air. You know what I mean? To kind of close it out, everyone said their piece. I think we know what everyone's doing. John, I appreciate what you're saying. Yep, I'm closing it.
I apologize too for the bringing it. Half of it was that we really wasn't sure how to do it.
Yeah.
Truth be told.
Yeah.
at the time. I wasn't sure how to get it on the agenda. The last time, and truthfully, time before that, it was just on the agenda. It went to, I guess Nick got a hold of it from somebody somehow, and it was on the agenda. So I'm guilty of being uninformed,
Are you talking about
trying to get it on the agenda with the select board, trying to get the questions put on the agenda.
and how did the space needs get on the agenda for tomorrow night? This topic we're talking
Well,
about.
because I've since learned, I know how to get it on the agenda now.
So that went on the agenda before our ask.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm stuck. I'll be honest with you. I'm stuck. The truth of the matter is I'm stuck.
Close out the item,
We're done. I'm stuck.
please.
All right. Moving on. Item 5B, Facilities Advisory Committee Report. So as I mentioned, school committee has a Facilities Advisory Subcommittee. Mark sits on that one. Does Selena sit on that one with you too?
No.
No, okay.
Anna Martin's.
Anna. Okay, yep. So if you could, take it away.
Yeah, just wanted to give an update. Obviously, again, as Sean said, there's been a lot of reports previously about all of the short-term stuff the Facility Advisory Committee has done. And essentially what that does is look at existing space within the building and how we can convert that into more usable instructional space, staff-facing space. So taking storage spaces, cutting up spaces, converting things, staff workrooms into kindergarten rooms and all kinds of things. And so a lot of that work has been done by the school staff. Again, shout out to Glenn and people even before him. And that work now continues. Tom is a big part of that now. Chris Hayden was part of that last year, and folks before that. So essentially looking at what the existing space is, because we do not have a budget to add on, and the most cost-effective way to improve space is to use what you already have. So over the summer, we look at a lot of things too beyond spaces, but I know y'all care most about space. Essentially, what we did was we had a large incoming kinder class, and most of those kids were from Collicott, zoned for Collicott. So in order to help that, we cut up part of the Cunningham Library. It was one of the spaces that used to have kind of half partition walls. Tom and his team, shout out to him, took those walls all the way up in order to make a more sound, appropriate space. Does mean we have now kind of more permanently lost space within the library. Please.
Yes, so is that the second grade classroom that was already there that had the pictures that we had before that had the partitions? Is it that space on a floor plan that's not a second grade space now, but full kindergarten with walls all the way up? Or is it another space within the library?
No, so the last year, so 2 years ago, there was a classroom in the library with the half partition walls. That was the second grade space. Last year, that space got turned into a teacher workroom. It was a second grade space because we had the flooding issues at the Cunningham.
Yep.
Right, which displaced 2 classrooms.
That was
Well, anyways, we turned, it was a teacher workroom last year.
Yep.
It's now been converted back to a classroom. It's not a kindergarten space. It's I'm not sure which grade, maybe second.
okay.
But that's the space that's been remade a classroom. So
Okay.
it was a classroom 2 years ago. It's now a classroom back with full walls.
Okay. You were talking about the large kindergarten class. That's why I thought you were talking.
The large, so the reason why is because again, it's like
Oh,
a
you-
puzzle piece.
Yeah, you
right?
took
So
that
every
class
year,
and, yeah,
we had a large 5th grade cohort at Glover that moved up to Pierce, but Pierce is big, but the kids were not zoned for Glover. Didn't want to put them at a school they weren't zoned for. This is one of the restrictions of the space stuff, right? So you have a large East Milton group. You don't want to have them go for the next 6 years to a school that they're actually not zoned for, and their kids, their friends and neighbors don't go to. So we need to put that at Collicott. How do we do that? Cunningham was stealing a room for Collicott. We take that room, give it back to Collicott, take Cunningham, put them in the library. This is also why, by building that room, the Glover now gets an extra room for this coming year, which they're turning into an art room. And all likelihood, Glover next year will take it over to kind of the balloon classes, because essentially every one of these years, there's like one school that takes the balloon class, the extra kindergarten class that then stays with them throughout the course. And then when they hit 5th grade, they kind of let it go and take in the new kindergarten. So Collicott took that extra kindergarten this year, even though they didn't really have the space for it. But just because of zoning, and Glover is the beneficiary of an extra art room. At Pierce, Tom and again, his team put up 2 other walls into spaces that have been temporary kind of classroom and pull-out spaces that have been temporary at this point for 8 years, 9 years. So there's a lot of this stuff where it's, they were hopeful it was temporary, didn't spend any money on it, so they did some partitions, and it just, at this point, it is permanent. And so put those walls fully up to help with the sound and make those spaces much more usable. There have been some, conversions. We've been working on the Cunningham 4th floor. That was another big thing. We obviously, as y'all know, got funding for that last town meeting. Tom and his team, again, shout out to Tom, it's kind of cleared out a lot of the 4th floor, opened up corridors to make it kind of code compliant, and then moved the teacher workroom up there. It does not have like the heating, fire stuff that we could put students up there, which means that at this point it's very limited in terms of what we can put, because there aren't a lot of non-student facing spaces within a school building. But the teacher workroom can go up there. That's the shared teacher space for both Collicott and Cunningham. And so they're maybe just Cunningham.
It's just Cunningham.
And so they're up top and will be for this year. Again, Tom's team made it look pretty nice, but still pretty bare bones space.
Mhm.
We are working with Aero Streets, who are working on designs for the 4th floor build out, as well as the current library reconfiguration, because the current plan would be to convert the 4th floor into the library along with some pull-out spaces for students. Again, that would require code compliance, ventilation, fire, sprinkler systems, things like that, all on the top floor, as well as student bathrooms. So that's on the 4th floor, and then the current library would be cut up further than it already has into additional classrooms to add some additional classroom space, please.
So essentially at that point, the library is fully gone on that floor and relocated up.
That's right.
Okay.
That would be the plan. And that's because the ceilings are very arched. It's a very nice space on the 4th floor, but it's very, very large and kind of open. So it's, unless you're cutting all that off with drop ceilings, it's good for,
Great
looks like
reading
it'd be good
next.
yeah, there you go. Looks like it'd be good for a library. So that is kind of where we're currently at with that. We only got the funding on July 1st, so we were not able to do much more than what Tom was already able to do with the 4th floor space. But we need a design, and then we need to go out to bid. And we are looking at cost estimates. So the next meeting, Air Street is joining the Facility Advisory Committee, and we'll go over cost estimates for that project. And again, talk about kind of what we can do, but our current budget is $2 million, which was again, estimated about $500 a square foot. That's where we're at.
Any questions? And double check online for the one's still on there just to make sure. Questions, comments? All right, seeing none. And item 5C is an enrollment update, student enrollment update. So you given that one too?
Yeah, I can give that.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
just I mean, that's something we look at also with the facility advisory, obviously, as we did with the whole Collicott, Glover, Cunningham kind of kindergarten reconfiguration stuff, just where those kids going. So I shared some of the numbers before, but overall total district enrollments last year was 4317. And actually, if you look at the DESI numbers, it was 4320. And as of when we met last school committee meeting, it was this year 4430. So it's 100 extra 100 kids. A lot of that is at in the high school. I'll clarify. High school has 10 extra kids, not 90 extra kids. Pierce is where we have 100 extra kids. Again, over 1,000 students at Pierce now. And then the other schools all, up a little bit, down a little bit, but overall, again, Glover's down a little bit because they lost one of those classrooms. Collicott is up a little bit because they gained a classroom. But overall, we're about 113 kids more than we were last year.
Is the increase at Pierce in the the fifth grade, that large fifth grade class coming up? Or is it because people didn't leave like they normally do in seventh grade?
So it was the class coming out more than, yeah, but the departures was somewhat static.
Well, our seventh grade last year was 331, and our eighth grade right now was 332. Our sixth grade was 352, or seventh grade this year is 359. So those cohorts are not getting smaller, at least. It might have left. It might be that the same number of kids is leaving, but we're just getting more kids coming back or moving into the district at that age. But yeah, the sixth grade got bigger, seventh grade got bigger, the eighth grade got a good bit bigger, because the eighth grade was the smallest cohort.
I just know that BC High, usually Milton is the largest, and they're wondering what happened to Milton at BC High this year in the seventh grade, because we didn't show up in the same numbers.
Five.
I think the sports programs, they're doing pretty well, so the kids may want to stay for the high school.
Hey, come on, do all the other great stuff. Academics.
Football player is phenomenal last year.
I think it's also
Peter's
BC High's
Yeah,
sports teams are pretty amazing, and nobody can get on the teams.
I was at Fenway this year, and they recognized a bunch of high school.
So they may have a better chance staying in Milton.
Literally, I was at Fenway, they recognized a bunch of high school teams. Literally, I think there was like 5 or 6 BC High, like
Rugby and baseball were there, yeah.
amazing. Yeah. I was in the Catholic conference against them when I was in high
And it
school.
also could be BC High had a 10% increase in their tuition costs.
Right.
One other thing, just with
Yes.
enrollment,
Sorry
I
about
think
that.
this goes back a little bit,
Just curious,
goes back a little,
selfishly.
a little bit to the report and the reference to
I'll
the
pick it up.
NASDAQ. And this is something, again, I credit Glenn because he talks about all the time, is just how much you need to take NASDAQ projected enrollments with a grain of sand, grain of salt, whatever the saying is. It'd be weird to put.
Salt dissolves.
All right. Right.
Make sure that
Let me
Chris-
keep going. I have to jump in there. Really, and so again, like the NASDAQ projections last year for this year said we'd be at 4419. We're at 4430. It said, you go back to 22, the 22 NASDAQ projections. They said our enrollments this year would be 4209. So they're just not vital. They need to be taken with a grain of salt and understand that they have been off. They can continue to be off, especially the further out you go as you do these reports that are now 10 years out using NASDAQ projections. They're just very wildly inaccurate at that point. But even a couple of years out, they have been off for us. Enrollment update.
Any questions? Check. Hearing none. All right, moving on. Second to last item, future meeting dates. So we've got September 23rd in there. I think at this point, we'll keep it as a placeholder, just to see if there's any updates of anything. And essentially that's the night before the next select board meeting. So I think we're good to kind of hold it as a placeholder, and then depending on if we don't have any agenda items, there's no need to hold a meeting, just hold the meeting. So unless anybody had a problem with that, we'll just kind of keep that on there for now. And if we cancel, we'll just audible and figure another meeting after.
I assume we're gonna have some updates if you guys are ready to.
Yeah, that's
my guess. We gotta work with you guys on.
I've been talking to Charlene, and I don't think our next meeting with the working group is until the 24th or the 25th.
And that's what I was, yeah, for me, if nothing big comes up, we audible and just go to the 30th, a week later, and then we give you guys a chance to kind of present an update.
Yeah, we will give it down this week.
All right, that's, yeah.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Big meeting.
Everybody's favorite agenda item 7, adjournment. So entertain the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Second. All right, roll call vote. Mark Loring,
Yes.
Carrie Hurley,
yes.
John Cohen.
Yes.
Glenn Hoffman,
Yes.
and Sean O'Rourke. Yes. Thank you very much. See you all in a couple weeks.